락스요 이근대입니다. 6주간 정말 중요한 대규모 프로젝트를 마쳤습니다. 현역 군인 경찰을 교육했습니다. 그리고 저희 정말 친한 친구와 전우 소개를 하겠습니다. Hey Adam, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
My name's Adam. I'm a father, I'm a brother, and I'm currently co-owner and director of special projects for Riker Defense. It's a defense and security related firm that helps people solve complex problems overseas. And I am a former Navy SEAL of 17 years.
So, how was the training, man? How was it?
Honestly, it was a lot of fun. First and foremost, that was my first trip to Korea. I appreciate the opportunity, and it sounded, like everyone got a good amount of exchange, myself included.
Yeah.
Hoping to come back out and continue it up.
Oh, we hope that you come back out again. Yeah, first time to Korea. I think you've been to one other Asian country, maybe it was Thailand, right?
Yeah,
But for work,
right.
this is pretty much the first time in Asia, huh?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it very different than the other FID missions that you've done in the past?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was just the 4 days, right? So I got a very brief snapshot, and it was different in that there was a pretty widely represented organizational participation there, right? So you
Yeah.
had people from all over the military, special operations guys to infantry guys to law enforcement, government officials. In that way it was really unique. Probably one of the first times I've ever done something like that. Uniquely challenging from the training perspective and the instructor perspective, but really rewarding in that I feel like I got to, both of us, we got to really infuse a lot of knowledge throughout a wide spectrum of participants.
Yeah, I mean, I think they got a really good taste of like CQB, the small unit tactics, the MAL training, and also night op. They're gonna go back to their units and try to bring back as many updates as possible, try to improve their SOP, and it takes a while to do that kind of stuff. So you're gonna have to come back out soon, but
Would love to, yeah.
I am gonna get you back out here, hopefully this year again.
All right.
But so what was the biggest difference that you've seen between the Korean side and like the Western side in terms of tactics? Pretty similar or very different?
Yeah, I was actually really well surprised at the fact that we shared more similarities, I think, than differences.
Right.
And I think that can be attributed to the number of exchanges that have happened between the two governments and the two countries. I didn't see anything really that I thought would be a problem if there was any requirement for an integration between units.
Yeah.
Your guys and everyone that participated was very open-minded, trainable, receptive, and that's huge. And I was not sure that would be the case, actually. You can run into egos a lot in this business,
Yeah,
particularly when you run into some of the specialized units. And there was zero ego throughout that experience, and everyone was very open to learning and sharing information. So from that perspective, I think it was unique, and I appreciated that about the Korean participants. They stripped away a lot of barriers that might have otherwise been there. And so I think we got a lot more out of the 4 days than we would have otherwise.
I agree. What other units have you trained in the past?
Well, domestically, I've trained with and provided instruction for almost every metropolitan police SWAT team, federal and local in the U.S. And then internationally, throughout my career, I was lucky enough to have quite a few exchanges with a lot of the top tier Five Eye community, so the Brits, the Aussies, Canadians. We have some really substantial exchange programs with those guys, and they're phenomenal operators, so we get just as much out of that as they do. And then all the way down to, the local nationals and their teams that are just budding up or just being created and developed, to include the Afghan partner soft that we use there, some of the Iraqi teams, the Iraqi SWAT teams, the ICTF guys in Baghdad, and so on and so forth.
Now, you were the youngest SEAL in history. Correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe up to a certain point, and also the youngest DevGru operator, from my understanding.
Yeah,
I know
again,
you
briefly.
joined at a very early age.
So definitely not of all time. Somebody I think has me beat to that. But I was relatively young going through the program. When I graduated and got my trident from SQT, I was 19 years old. Okay, so at the
19.
time, as the freshest graduate of that program and as the youngest guy in that class, I was the youngest SEAL in the Navy. And to my understanding, there was a few more classes that needed to be progressed through that pipeline before someone else took the seat there. But
Right.
brief period of time. And then similarly for Green Team, that selection course, there's definitely been guys that have finished that course that were younger than me, but not by much. In that case, I finished that course when I was 24.
So you were a dev group operator at 24. Wow, that's really young. From my understanding, a lot of the dev group operators are in their 30s.
Yeah. It's a much more mature force.
Yeah.
A lot of guys would argue that I was too young to go through that course.
Yeah, I think I remember you were saying that one of your instructors were like, I don't agree with this, Yeah, you made it through, you're a dev group operator, but something's wrong here. You're just too young.
It was actually my team leader who, up the first day I met him when I checked into the squadron.
Damn,
he kind of put me in
24 years
check.
old.
Yeah.
amazing.
And it was for good reason, looking back. I lacked some key maturity,
Yeah.
despite the fact that I had done, 2 combat deployments before that, had the opportunity to do that. And I think was given the opportunity to have some high levels of responsibility in my younger formative, years.
Yeah.
I got to the command and it was way, it was at a much higher level. And it took a lot of growing up to be able to really sink in there.
Were you always humble or did they humble you?
That's hard to say. I don't know if I'm self-aware enough to answer that question, but I was provided many experiences that provided humility for me throughout that experience, continually, almost on a weekly or daily basis. So if you do show up to that place with a little bit of an ego, it often gets put in check, and then ultimately combat does a really good job of doing that for you as well. And there's plenty of that going around at the time.
Yeah, of course. Man, that's amazing. You were in the Navy by 17, right? Because it's a 2-year SEAL pipeline, almost 2 years. By 19, full-fledged SEAL, and then a 24 dev group operator. Is there like a requirement saying that you have to go on a couple of pumps before you try out for dev group?
Yeah. And again, I can't speak to the way things are sitting right now. I've been out for a few years, and things are continually evolving. But that's one of those things that I could pretty well safely say that unless you've done at least 2 full training workups with the SEAL team and 2 deployments, you're not going to be eligible. And it's getting more and more competitive from that regard. They're doing a more in-depth screening process, more thorough screening process to get guys through the front door. So there's not a lot of combat going on right now throughout the U.S. military. So that for that aspect of it, it's not as predetermined that everyone going into Green Team will have that experience behind them.
Right.
But they still are prioritizing that level of experience.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but our unit also has a Tier 1 unit within the flotilla. So we call it the flotilla, Naval Special Warfare Flotilla. And within our unit, we have SMB. So we have the standard battalions, and we have the Special Missions Battalion. So they are our Tier 1 unit. The way we do things is mostly kind of like a rotational thing. The SAS does that. They go from counter-terrorist troop to mobility troop to mountain troop to boat troop. So we're kind of like the same way. Whereas for you, there's a selection process, which is called Green Team. What do you think the pros and cons to that is? Like, I honestly think that your method is a lot better. I've been trying to push that for a long time, being a former SMB officer and operator. But the feedback that I got from higher brass, and we butt heads all the time, right? They were like, hey, we're a frog family. All of us are a family. And if you do something like that, like a elite unit within an elite unit, there's going to be a lot of, what's the word? Animosity. Yeah, a lot of jealousy, a lot of, bullshit going on. And that's not good for the community. So that's the feedback that I got from higher brass. And I didn't really agree with them. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I guess, are you asking if there's a benefit to having a tried and true selection pipeline within a specialized community to kind of like hone in a little bit better on your talent? I think there absolutely is a benefit. I think it will depend on your organization and your requirements. You know, that should always drive training,
Yeah.
and that should drive organization. So if you have the requirement there, then I would say I would invite you guys to explore that opportunity. For us, you know, we have a pretty wide pool of candidates to select from. You know, the SEAL teams are, you know, there are thousands of operators within the SEAL teams, and it's, you know, at a certain level of operation, you know, you need to have a very specialized individual to be
Right.
able to handle that, and in a team likewise. So
Yeah.
in the U.S., this has been, you know, the template, and we've created a unique system, I think, that I believe in, and
Yeah.
that worked really well.
Was your goal always to go into Dev Group? Or was it just like, I want to be a SEAL, became a SEAL, and like, hey, there's another elite unit. I'm going to try out for that.
Yeah, you know, this may sound ridiculous, right? But I have notebooks from high school. I knew that I wanted to be a SEAL before I went to high school, right? I wanted to be, I wanted to be a SEAL when I was
In junior high?
12, 13 years old.
Yeah, that's about me too. Yeah, around that time frame.
And I think honestly, if I were going to be more reflective, I probably knew I wanted to be a SEAL much younger than that, but I just didn't know what SEALs were, you know. But I knew that I wanted to do that thing.
How did you find out? Was it the Richard Marcinko book or the
You
Charlie
know,
Sheen movie?
I can't remember the moment that I, you know, like that I came across that term, that phrase, or the name SEAL teams. But it was popular culture. You know, it was movies. It was the documentary series that were out. It was the books. I was a voracious reader going into high school. So, but to answer your question, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I had read Dick Marcinko's books. You know, The Rogue Warrior being one of the first books that I read about the community, and any young man aspiring to be his best and fulfill his potential, and then that's the direction you want to go, and you pick up that book and you see what those guys are doing and what they're all about,
Right.
you're going to be hard pressed to not want to be a part of it, right? So I actually had my life planned out, like in written format, from the time I was, you know, joining the Navy at 17 all the way through, projected for like the next 10 years. And it surprisingly did kind of fall out that way. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know the first thing about that command or even the SEAL teams or anything about the military really, other than what I'd read. But that was something I wanted to be a part of. I knew it was something big. I knew it was something special, something bigger than myself. And I wanted to drive for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I kind of grew up in the States. Half my life was in Korea, the other half in the United States. So I grew up, you know, reading those books, Richard Marcinko. I think we're pretty much the same age, you know, 1984, 85, right? Yeah. And, you know, 12, 13 years old, I knew what I wanted to do. And
it would have been interesting as kids to have known each other, you know, like
It
thinking
would.
about you on the other side of the world and me on one side of the world, and
I know, it's crazy.
similar aspirations
Yeah.
and dreams, and then here we are intersected today, you know. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's funny how life turns out.
Yeah.
But I have no regrets, you know. I ended up coming back to Korea to do my military, but at least I got to go back to the U.S. to do BUDS and SQT, even though I had to do everything twice. You know, I had to do my BUDS and then U.S. BUDS. The fuck, right?
What a nightmare.
Yeah, even with the officer thing, I had to go through VMI, which is NROTC, and then I had to do OCS in Korea, you know?
Yeah.
So I had to do everything twice. And, shit, if I could count how many times I shaved my head, it's a little too much.
Well, you
know?
got to figure it out now.
Yeah, because I like my hair.
Right,
But,
right.
yeah, it was a good experience. And from what I learned, you know, going through the U.S. SEAL teams, the U.S. SEAL qualification training and all that, that was big when I went through SQT. They were stripping tridents. And it made me realize, like, how tough the community is. It's not the end game when you got your trident, right? It's not the end game because you became a SEAL. You got to earn your trident every day. And stripping tridents was kind of big that year when I went through 2012 to 2013. People were getting kicked out, you know, because they weren't performing at the standard in the teams. And you being a former DevGru operator, you know, like within DevGru, like you don't train properly. You're not physically fit, you're not capable of doing the job, you may be asked to leave. You know?
Absolutely. The saying
Yeah.
that you earn your trident every day, I think, is a great way to describe the sentiment within the community. And then when at Dev Group, selection is an ongoing process was
Right.
something that you would hear constantly.
Yeah.
And it didn't even need to be said. Guys held each other to a very high standard. They'd be like brothers to you.
Yeah.
Like really some of the closest friends and the closest humans to you.
Yeah.
But when it came to the work, there was a strictly professional standard that needed to be met, and it wasn't necessarily objective. There's no like written task standard for a lot of things that we're expected to do well.
Yeah.
Some of them are not necessarily tactically focused. They're more social focused and decision making and things like those that are softer skills. But
Yeah.
you're expected to perform at your best, and not just expected, but asked to regularly. And I was, again, just so lucky to be able to step into that community at the time that I did, when the work was plentiful and a lot was being asked of that community by the nation at the time. So I was able to apply, and everyone was asked to apply those skills, and it became readily apparent when someone fell short.
Yeah, when I graduated from SQT, you know how we get the SQT certificate with the seal trident in the middle?
Yeah.
And I also got another, kind of like an antique letter, and what it was the SEAL Creed. I had that framed at my apartment, got my SEAL certificate, and underneath the SEAL Creed.
Yeah,
and I look at it every morning, and it's a warrior code that I believe in, I really like everything that's in it, and I agree with it, and it's very meaningful to me. So I like how the graduation was done, and how your community, like the warrior community, how you have to perform every single day. I mean, it's tough, but it's also special at the same time,
So do you have a creed within your community?
Yes, we do. It's actually pretty similar, but ours are in like bullet points almost. It's like 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
And we would say it every morning during our version of Buds.
Yeah,
But
I'd like to read it sometime.
I will share it with you. Yeah.
Thanks.
But I mean, even in the civilian world, I transferred to the reserves. I got my own company, but I try to follow the SEAL Creed every day of my life, and it helps a lot, tremendously. And what's crazy is because I do consulting for the military, for law enforcement, I do it for civilians as well. So I use that SEAL Creed, and I share it with my audience, with my students, and it helps them in their everyday lives tremendously.
And I mean, the standards are high, right? I mean, I think the SEAL Creed is available online if anyone wants to check it out, but it's a very high standard, and sometimes you fall short, but it is the benchmark. It's the thing to hold your team accountable and strive for every day. And I agree that it is applicable to all walks of life. If you can strive for those principles, then you'll be more successful in pretty much anything you do.
Yeah, which reminds me of the hostage rescue mission that we did during the training this week.
Yeah.
You told the students, like, this is the job. You signed up to be in this kind of unit to do hostage rescue. And remember when the guys walked into that room and the first 3 guys got shot, and they would ask, how could I do this differently? How could I have lived through that, or whatever? And I remember you saying, sometimes there is no other way. There's only one entryway, one stairway, and just got to get in the door or get in the room, and that's what you signed up for. So that really hit them.
Yeah, I think hostage rescue is probably the most difficult thing for anyone to be asked to do.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion, particularly for a team. It's not only difficult, but it asks you to give everything you have for a person that ostensibly you've never met.
Right.
And that is your job, and there's one way to do it, and oftentimes that is to expose yourself to extreme risk.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, like, how many deployments have you been on first, and then after that, like, how many ad hoc operations you've been on? Because sometimes you could be stateside, back at home, at Virginia Beach, and you get the call, and you got to go. How many deployments though, like standard military deployments, have you been on?
Yeah, I did 8. I was able to do 8 combat deployments.
Shit, 8, man.
It's not
Yeah.
as much as a lot of guys. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember when I checked into my team as a new guy
Yeah.
at the development group, my fire team leader was, I think, sitting at 14 or 15 combat deployments, and it's not uncommon for guys in senior, positions to have 18, 19 or more deployments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of exposure, a lot of opportunity. Over the course of 8 combat deployments, the deployments ranged from 4 to 6 months per. I was fortunate in that I didn't have to do any sort of administrative deployment or training deployment or JSET my entire career. It was all combat. Yeah.
That's rough. I mean, like 8 deployments, combat, it takes a toll on your body. And
Yeah.
I remember you telling me that you're very fortunate to be healthy, no critically broken bones or anything like that, no major surgeries. Yeah. But glad you're
Consider
healthy.
myself lucky.
Yeah, glad you're healthy.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, but 8 deployments, and you're not even that old, man. I mean, the thing with a lot of the DevGru operators, like some of the guys that we know, like Matt Bach, right? Who's the legend over there? What's his name?
Jim?
Yeah, Jim, right? Yeah, he's got like, what, 25 deployments or something like that?
Yeah. He's a legend. And
Yeah.
That's a good word to use to describe him.
Yeah.
I know him very well. I don't want to speak for him,
Right.
but he's got my utmost respect. And
Yeah.
anytime I get to interact with guys of his level of experience,
Yeah.
I relish it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, I mean, if you do the math, each deployment is like 4 to 6 months. I mean, if you have like 15 deployments, what the hell? How long have you spent back at home,
Yeah, they're not that much
Yeah.
for guys. I think I did the calculations at some point, and I was gone for over 300 days out of every year
Yeah.
that I was on active duty service. Most of those were for training trips, but about one deployment per year, every year and a half, something like that.
On average, each deployment about how many operations?